Welcome to Modern Financial Wellness, the podcast dedicated to helping you feel better about your finances. I'm your host, Jim Grace, and I'll be your guide as we discuss the psychology of money and explore the emotional aspects that shape our financial decisions and how we feel about them. All right, everybody, welcome back to Modern Financial Wellness. I am joined today by my friend Dan Haylett. Dan is a financial planner. He's the head of growth at TFP Financial Planning in the UK. He's also the creator of Humans vs. Retirement, which is more than just a podcast. He obviously has a podcast, a blog, a newsletter, a YouTube channel, author of a new white paper, The Skill of Spending Money in Retirement. He's wearing many hats. We're grateful to have him here. Dan, welcome to the show. Thanks for taking the time.
Jim, my pleasure. It's absolutely wonderful to be this side of the mic. I don't do this that often, and I love it.
Glad to twist your arm and put you on the other side, up against the firing squad here today. Yeah, this is cool. I mean, we met in a behavioral advising certificate course, which was many years ago now, which is crazy to think about. So it's always fun to connect with you and kind of get your perspective on the industry and how you're helping clients and some of the work that you're putting out there. So again, I appreciate the time. As we kick off, I was curious if you could describe for people the work that you do. And obviously, as a financial planner, there's kind of the basic blocking and tackling and the technical aspects of helping people understand retirement. But there's a whole host of other things that clients struggle with. So I'm curious your thoughts on maybe more so that side of your work.
There's two elements, really. I would say there is, but there's, I suppose, three, right? You've got what everyone would expect a financial planner to do with kind of numbers and planning and investing and all of that stuff, crunching the numbers. And then kind of added on top of that, you've definitely got the human element, as we're going to touch into a lot more. So how human beings react to numbers, how they act around numbers, how they take on board advice and guidance and what they do and why they don't do stuff, and all of the psychology behind that is definitely another layer. And then kind of moving through that, I would say that it's more about education. So there's definitely kind of, for me, I'm a financial advisor and financial planner that really loves to understand the human mind and what, us as human beings and how we react around money, particularly in the retirement space, which we'll get into. But then also understanding that there is, I think, a complete lack of education out there around this stuff. And that's where kind of Humans versus Retirement was born, to go, well, actually, I do this work on a day-to-day basis with clients at TFP. So I work one-on-one with clients. And I'm doing a lot of the number stuff. I'm increasingly doing more and more of the behavioral and what I would say kind of retirement coaching, money coaching stuff with people. Mm-hmm. But I still think there is a gap. And that's where I wanted to kind of get a bit more of an education platform out there for as many people as I possibly could get it out to listen, to read, to watch some of this stuff. Because I think there's a huge lack of education in general around money, but education in specifically around retirement.
Yeah, it's great. And you're putting out a lot of great work. I mentioned the white paper that just came out, The Skill of Spending Money in Retirement, was a new piece of work that you released not too long ago. And I think it does a great job highlighting a lot of what you just described, right? Which is this idea that there's a lot of numbers and number crunching that goes into something like planning for retirement and preparing. But there's a whole host of other human behavior, psychology that goes into really living the life that you want when you decide to stop working. So tell us about the white paper. Can you set the stage for maybe the problem that some retirees face when they're nearing retirement?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I'll absolutely go into the white paper. I think it's worth kind of stepping back a tiny bit there, and for me, just going, well, actually, like all of the work that I've done over the last 7-8 years, focusing on this retirement space. So what I've heard described quite beautifully as like the fragile decade, like the 5 years before retirement and the 5 years after. I think that's, a hugely fragile time for people. And understanding what those main challenges are. And I've come up with what I think are the retirement big five. And that is in a specific order. I think it's identity, purpose, relationships, time, and money security. So those are the five things that I think people need to really work on. So it got me thinking about there's something that connects all of these, I think, and it got me thinking around, what does it mean for someone retiring? What is one of their main challenges when it comes to actually taking advantage of their time and their money and their relationships, thinking about who they want to be and what they want to do? And I think one of the biggest blockers of everything overarching that is the fact that people are scared to spend their money. And this kind of really the concept come from me saying, how do we get people to shift from a savings habit, so a habit that's been ingrained in people for 20, 30, 40 years. It was ingrained in people as a child. Our parents and grandparents save for the future, put money away. It's ingrained in us through maybe as we save in our early years of working. In the UK, they've got this thing called auto enrollment, which means that you automatically put money into a pension before you say, so this thing is ingrained in us. We're ingrained to save. That means that all of our human behaviors take over and we associate saving and money with security. So having a pot of money provides us with security and peace of mind. It doesn't actually give us any joy when we hit retirement if we can't actually spend this thing, because it's so ingrained in our mindset, in our habits and our behaviors. So this was about getting people to shift from a savings habit to a spending mindset in order for them to take full advantage of their second half of life, their retirement.
The big five that you mentioned, you start out with identity. And it's a huge identity shift, obviously, when somebody goes from their working years into retirement. But a part of their identity as a saver could be something like, I'm saving and putting away to plan for my retirement to create that sense of security. So now you're in almost trying to intentionally change that person's identity, right, when they enter retirement, which is a really big, challenging deal for a lot of people.
Without putting too kind of feeling like I'm not catastrophizing this, but I do think we're at the start of a bit of an identity crisis for people kind of in their 40s and 50s, right? People, our identity has been wrapped up in so much of what we do and the behaviors around that. Like you said, it's, we go to work, we save for a particular date, milestone, time. And unfortunately, all of those behaviors that we've exhibited and we've learned throughout that period is the opposite of what we need to take advantage of everything that we've worked for. It's like, it's counterintuitive for us to flick a switch and spend our money and see that money go down. And that's why so many people struggle with spending their money. And I just think if you struggle with spending, if you're not free and you're not this doesn't mean frivolous, right? This doesn't mean blow it all away. But if you're not free to feel like you can spend your money, I think you struggle with identity, purpose, relationships, and time. Because, you've got a wholesale shift that you're going to need to take. And if you haven't put some work in about understanding the skills required to spend money and some of the realities around spending money, I really, people aren't going to take advantage of those 20, 30, 40 years of hard work that they've put in to get to a point where they feel like they have enough and they can step back and be free to enjoy their life. And it's just a massive letdown thereafter.
Yeah. One of the terms that I've heard that I like a lot, referring to retirement, and I wish I could attribute it to the person that I got this from, but I've heard it related to identity foreclosure. Right. So you're foreclosing on this person that I was before, moving away from a career that gave me purpose and meaning, a reason to get up in the morning, so to speak. And we're moving into this new phase of life. Can we talk about some of these fears of spending? Because I I like what you've touched on this idea that we're kind of on the cusp of an identity crisis. And a lot of that feels like it's driven from fear. But the fear of, say, for example, running out of money in retirement, numbers wouldn't really bear out that that's a realistic fear. And you touch on this, I think, a little bit in the white paper with some of the statistics that you put out in terms of, clients not spending money in retirement, but also ending up with more money than they started with. Right.
Yeah.
So we have this almost, it seems like, if I read this correctly, it's almost like an irrational fear of running out of money in retirement, where they end up with more when they pass away. So what's kind of driving this fear? What's at the heart of that?
Yeah, look, I think our great friend Brian Portnoy, who kind of headed up the course that we met on, said something, and I attribute this to him in this quote in the white paper. I think we need to start from a point of, you used the word irrational. I think we need to start from a point of, like, nothing is irrational if we understand where people have come from. I think from an outsider looking in, and actually us as individuals, we might feel like we're being irrational, but actually nothing is irrational. It's not irrational for people that have saved more than enough to not spend their money. Mm-hmm. If you understand exactly where they've come from and why they're not spending it. Because we have been conditioned, as I said, to kind of not spend effectively. Mm-hmm. We're taught to save. We're not taught to spend. So I think when it comes to thinking about these numbers, people are fearful about running out of money, yet not fearful about leaving loads unspent and a load of regret and missed opportunities. That's kind of the irrational swing. But actually, they're fearful of both. The trouble is, the fear of running out of money dominates. So that is the dominating fear, because in our brains, when I've spoke to people about this, there's binary outcomes, right? This is kind of like, I've either got money or I'm on the streets in a cardboard box. Right? And that's where the brain goes with this. It goes to a point where, and actually, for people that have had a reasonably successful career, a good bank balance and stuff has been a sign of success for them. And they might have a social network of people that they do really like, but if they feel anxious about their money, or their money's halved, or whatever that looks like, that's a sign that they haven't done well and they might be failing at this retirement thing. Mm-hmm. So they protect against that. We will protect against the fear of running out of money, because the less worse outcome is dying with too much. I would flip that and say that's a much worse outcome. So when I look at the statistics, when I put this white paper together, I come across some studies, and there was a big study in the States done that said 61% of people are more afraid of running out of money than in retirement than actually dying. Like, when you say that out loud, I'm like, that's ridiculous.
Right.
So 6 out of 10 people would rather die than run out of money, or are more fearful of, like, I mean, so the trouble with that attitude is that shows you how emotionally draining, how emotionally connected money is to us as human beings in this world.
Right. And they're so fearful of it. The other statistic that I think I have right is about 30 to 40% of people will actually die with more money than they started at the beginning of their retirement, or their net worth will be higher when they pass away than it was when they started retirement. So they're so fearful of running out of money that they're actually going to grow their net worth. Right. And I think you're making the point that there's so much opportunity for living in those years that they're not taking full advantage of that. Is that right?
Absolutely. As I said, you've got it, hit the nail on the head. The flip side is, and I suppose that's the point, Jim, right? It's not just I don't know whether you can have small or big fears. It's not a small fear. They're so fearful. Mm-hmm. These 61% of people are so fearful of running out of money that the other stat on the flip side is 84% of retirees are likely to die with more money than they started with.
80. So I said 30 to 40. I misquoted. Right. It's the vast majority. Yeah.
Yeah. So, and so the stat that you're referring to, again, so let's repeat that. People are so fearful of running out of money that 84% of retirees are likely to die with more than they started with. And over a 30-year time period, there was some really amazing research done over here in the UK. Over a 30-year period, retirees on average are only spending around 30 to 40% of their starting net wealth, excluding property. They're leaving between 60 and 70% of their starting net wealth on the table by the time they've kind of gone through a 30-year time period. So not only is this a fear, it's actually a fear that's causing huge amounts of problems for people. Because, again, if we look at some other stats that are out there, only 14% of people are actually drawing down capital from their savings. The other 86% of people are drawing on the returns or less. You know, and you walk life with clients. How many times do clients come to you and people come to me and go, I've got this amount of money. Can I leave that? I want the pot remaining stable and I'm going to live off the returns or the dividends or the interest. That is not the reason why they saved that money. The reason why they saved that money is to spend it and enjoy it. But only 14% of people feel free enough to actually draw this thing down over a period of time to go and live. So it's startling statistics. But I always want to try and, you know, when I start working with people and communicating this stuff, I want to give them stats. This is real life evidence that, fortunately enough, now we've got at our fingertips. We've now got evidence from the first generation of retirees over the last 20, 30 years. Because I say, like, my parents and my grandparents retired in something that is alien to us, right? They retired in a very different way. So we've now got 20, 30 years of data about how these people are acting and behaving. And by the way, it's not great.
Right. And that's actually a really good point. I think the whole paradigm of retirement has shifted quite a bit in the last however many years, but it certainly seems like that paradigm shift is continuing to evolve. And I think, to me, it's kind of connected to that identity crisis that you mentioned before, where all of a sudden people have plenty of money and lots of time and they don't know what to do with it. Right. And they've been ingrained with these behaviors and these beliefs about money for so long that they just get stuck and end up dying with too much money and not living the life that they want. So I guess this brings up a question, when should people start thinking about this and the retirement and designing the life that they want to live and being able to feel comfortable spending the money? When should people start thinking about what this looks like?
Yeah, so it's a really good question, actually. I think the standard answer that most people would give would be as soon as possible.
Right.
I don't necessarily believe in that, because I actually think this work needs to be pretty intense, pretty concentrated, and really focused. And if you say to people, I'll work on this over the next 10 years, you know anything. If you've got a 10-year plan, you kind of do bits and bobs, you don't pay enough attention to it. And with most things, you know, like for instance, in our business, we have like quarterly rocks, they call them, right? So, you know, a real big thing that we want to do every quarter, quite a lot of quarters, I'll leave it to the last 4 weeks to get the thing done. It's like, if I've got a time frame, I'll kind of potter around a little bit and then really focus on it at the end. So I think what I would suggest to people, I mentioned that fragile decade, which I think is really important. I think if you're serious about wanting to think about your second half of life, let's ban the word retirement. I'm going to say it, but let's try and ban it a little bit. If you're 50 plus and you're thinking about your second half of life and you're thinking about how can I become more free, get a bit more time, align what I do with a bit more purpose, do more of what I want to do with, you know, so, you know, retirement in disguise, then I think you want to give yourself 2 to 3 years of kind of run-in and lead-in period to this. Anything outside of that, I would suggest just keep, you know, live your life and don't necessarily sacrifice everything. But because I think if you sacrifice everything, you will then sacrifice stuff in retirement, because you're going to sacrifice everything to get a pot of money that, by the way, most people are not going to spend. Which seems stupid, right? That's why I have struggled with the FIRE movement, because they are sacrificing everything for this pot of money and this independence that every stat going suggests they are never going to take full advantage of because they're human beings. So I would say that be prepared to put some hard work in, but 2 to 3 years out from knowing that you want to make some real key life decisions about what you want to do in your second half of life, and I would say second half of life is 50 plus, then that to me would be the best time to really tackle it.
Yeah, I love the way you put that. I too have a kind of a love-hate relationship with the FIRE movement, the concept of financial independence and understanding how much money you need to live the life you want. I love it. But, saving 70% and eating ramen noodles and never going out to the movies or out to dinner with friends to, eventually just not do anything. So on the fringes and the extremes of that movement, that's where, I have to get off the train. I just, it's all about balance, right? And being able to, live the life you want with the resources that you have. And I want to just click on that point about, obviously you should be as early as possible and be thinking about your financial plans and designing the life that you want. But, a 10-year time horizon is really difficult for people to get their hands around, right? So I'm hearing you say that putting in some focused work on this second half of life can be really important and motivating to give people a target to get something done, which is great. So what does that look like when clients come to you and they're in that 2 to 3 year period? What are some of the things, exercises, frameworks? What do you start talking to people about thinking about this second half of life?
So I think it's really to me it's important to start to think about this foundationally from a life perspective, right? So to me this is life first financial planning, and it's life first because that is, to me, that's the driver of it, right? If someone said to me, how much money do I need? The answer is, I don't know really until you tell me the kind of life that you really want. And my experience has told me that, and shown me with working with clients, that the life they actually want is probably a lot more simpler and costs a lot less than what they believe this is going to be. So without kind of telling them that up front, because I think that would scare the life out of them, I've got that in the back of my head. So I've created what I call a retirement planning workbook, which enables me to take people through exercises around values, around kind of their life. I love the PERMA model for human flourishing, this positive psychology. So I do some exercises around that.
Can you explain that? Because I like that as well. Can you tell us a little bit more about that? I think that'd be useful for people.
Yeah. So the PERMA model was developed by psychologist Martin Seligman, who basically was the key driver in positive psychology, right? Psychology beforehand was about fixing broken people. You had to break and then be fixed by a psychologist. And Marty Seligman kind of come around, well, actually, no, that's rubbish. We can actually be positive. So instead of waiting for people to break, let's give them tools and ways to understand how to be happy, right? How to not be sad. So his PERMA model framework. So you've got the P is for positive emotion, the E is for engagement, the R is for relationships, the M is for meaning, and the A is for accomplishment. That's a framework for what he says is understanding and cultivating well-being. So it breaks human flourishing down into those 5 components, and ultimately it gives people a sense of their happiness and fulfillment. So there's some questions that I ask based on those those kind of 5 areas. For instance, positive emotion. I ask people to rate themselves on a scale of 1 to 10. How frequently do you experience positive emotions like joy, contentment, and optimism in your life? Consider how often you feel good or enjoy pleasurable moments. Like kind of 1 to 10. And then there are, questions around engagement and relationships and meaning and accomplishment. And I think that gives me a really good foundation to go, well, if someone's at a 2 or a 3 or a 4 or a 5, my question back was, well, what does that mean? And how could we change that? if they're at a 7, an 8, or a 9, I'll kind of say to them, that's wonderful. Tell me what that means. How do we keep it there? If they're at kind of 8, 9, and 10, it's like, well, what might cause that to fall? So it gives us a real good understanding across a real positive way of looking at well-being and kind of life satisfaction and happiness around a really well-researched model and scale.
Yeah. It sounds a lot like a coaching framework that you've kind of embedded into your financial planning process to get at some of these core concepts that you highlighted before, right? So we are talking about people that their identity is going to dramatically change when they retire. A lot of people derive a lot of purpose and meaning from their kids who get up older and move away, or their career, which they're going to walk away from in retirement. And then we're telling them, you got to find purpose and meaning. It's like, well, how do you do that? Right. Which is why I appreciate you kind of clicking in on that example, that there are things out there that somebody like you can guide a client through to help them start to put some frameworks around these things, some ideas down on paper to move them through it and get them closer to understanding it.
And we've talked about the same things, right? Human beings quite like boxes and frameworks. We quite like having a model or a framework to think about. It helps us it helps us to put stuff into compartments. Can't say the word. And I would encourage if your listeners, people listening to this, are thinking about one of the big five, the purpose thing and identity and what that looks like. I'm a massive fan of a number of Japanese concepts, and one of the things I take people through is the Japanese concept of ikigai, which is, you can Google it. There are downloadable worksheets, but I think and I've done a huge amount of kind of digging around the best ways to try and ask people or get out of people what their purpose might be and how to get them to start thinking. And this is by far the best way to do it. And the great thing about ikigai is that it allows you to take money out of the equation. So it will get you to look at what do you love doing? What are you good at? What problems do people have that you can help solve? Which I think is a wonderful question, right? If you're thinking about purpose, what problems do people have that you think you can solve? And particularly at this stage of life, Jim, right? I've said to people before, if you're in retirement, your second half of life, you're at a point where you've accumulated so much knowledge and wisdom that you can help people solve a lot of problems. If you just think about what you really love to do and what skills you've got. And then what kind of work could you do that's either paid or volunteering? And if you kind of ask yourself those 4 questions and jot some thoughts down, it's a really good starting point to uncovering some of your purpose and what you want to do in this part of life.
Yeah, that's great. So you're sitting down with clients, you're taking them through things like a PERMA model, you're talking about Ikigai. This is all part of your retirement workbook and kind of laying the groundwork. And where do you go from there once you start to get an idea of where this individual is headed?
We then what I'll try and do is keep presenting. So if we kind of maybe shoot back to the white paper bit a little bit, what I will try and do is understand some of these life elements, understand the opportunities, understand the challenges, understand some of the fears, some of the anxieties, etc., that are out there, and bring in some of the research and evidence and planning models that I know work, but do it in a way that I can then make it unique to them. So the message is different for everybody, dependent on how we go through those kind of coaching questions. And so that's then about trying to connect their financial situation with their current reality and their future wishes. And we use, there's planning software to be able to kind of bring this to life in terms of cash flow and all of that stuff. But I want to make sure that we use the evidence to structure this. So for instance, in the white paper, I talk about how retirees do actually spend their money. So when I do the planning work, And if I understand that they've got this fear of running out of money, I want to make sure I overemphasize the fact that I know spending falls in real time in retirement. I want to make sure that in the planning work that I do with them, I color code certain times in their life, like the go-go years or the go slow years and the no-go years, or I've kind of readjusted the wording. I quite like exploring, nesting and reflecting now.
Can we click in here? Because I thought
Yeah.
that was really, really good to kind of frame the phases of retirement or the stages of retirement. How do you think about that?
Yeah, and again, I think this is understanding that our desire, physically and mentally, drops throughout our years, and this is kind of going, well, actually, there is a time in our lives when health is on our side. So the big three, kind of, it's health, money, and time. I think the first 10 to 15 years of retirement is when health, money, and time is probably as perfectly aligned as it's ever going to be. You know, if we think about our early years, we've got no money, probably quite a bit of time, enough health. If we think about our working life, we've got no time, probably a bit more money, and a bit more health. If you then skip this bit I talked about and go to our later life, we've probably got a load of money, not a lot of time, and our health is a bit rubbish.
Right.
So if you think about this kind of exploring phase of retirement, the first 10 or 15 years, the big three of health, money, and time is probably as perfectly aligned and balanced as it's ever going to be. So this is about saying, well, these are your go-go years. This is your exploring time. You can have higher spending on travel and hobbies and discretionary activities. You've got this newfound freedom that you can take advantage of. Your energy levels are high. So you're going to, you want to do stuff at that point. That's the bit that people miss. That's the bit. Because when we get into the nesting or the go slow years, there's just this natural decline in discretionary spending, lifestyle adjustments, reduced physical capacity. We end up nesting down a little bit. We want a much more comfortable standard of living. We don't want to be on a plane for 24 hours. We don't necessarily want to be on the cruises. And the trouble is, if you don't take advantage of those first 10 years, it's pretty much guaranteed you're going to never run out of money and end up with more money than you need, because your spending declines so dramatically.
This is a personal example. I was talking to my father, who's going to be 78 this October, and we got into the lottery and got tickets to the Ryder Cup, which is coming up this fall in Long Island. And so tickets were super expensive. So after I talked him into just biting the bullet, let's get the tickets to the Ryder Cup. Then he started talking about his knees and the crowds. And, this is a guy who loves golf, and to go to a major golf event like that would be normally a big deal. But I got to talk him into it a little bit, because he's getting up there in years and his health isn't, and his mobility isn't what it used to be. So it's not just the money. He's just naturally less inclined to jump at an opportunity like that because he's getting older. Right. Yeah. So it's not, our spending doesn't continue linearly throughout retirement. We're going to change as people, and our spending is going to reflect that as we get older.
And what I'll say is, it's actually, sometimes it's not actually the desire. Like, people want to do it, they just won't be able to do it as well as they could have done 5-10 years ago. So your father will absolutely probably go to the Ryder Cup, but if he'd have gone 10 years ago, he would have got around more, walked around more, seen more shots, had more probably joy. It's not that he's not going to enjoy himself. It's just he could have enjoyed himself better 10 years ago, potentially. Right. Then that's so. I think that's, there's another stat I put in there. There was a big study, a big study done in the in the UK, about how health stops people doing stuff. And the stat that stood out for me was from the age of 80 onwards, 75% of people said that health stops them from doing the things that they want to do. And my point is that everyone's obsessed by this kind of 100-year life, which, don't get me started on it. We could probably spend a whole podcast on this 100-year life, right? By the way, lifespan's going backwards. So if we have a look at the research on that, it's fascinating. But everyone's obsessed about this 100-year life. But the problem is, if you make it for 100 years, 20 of them, you're not going to really want to do anything. Health span is very different to lifespan, as I've said a lot before.
Mm-hmm.
So in the UK, the average health span, or as it's officially known in the UK as HLE, healthy life expectancy, is 62 years. So our average life expectancy is, say, 80 to 84 years. The World Health Organization has come out and said that its research suggests that on average, there's about 10, 11 years of life left after our health has gone. So stop planning to do things when you're 80, because even if you get there, you're never going to take advantage of the thing that's in front of you. Maybe like your dad, fully embracing the Ryder Cup.
Yeah. And I don't want to overstate it. He's going to go. It was just a realization. His response to the Ryder Cup, I thought was like, yeah, let's go. Let's do it.
Yeah.
Just took him a little longer to warm up because he's thinking about all these things about getting around and getting down there and all that. So I noticed in the white paper, you look at risk-based spending and having some capacity to spend in some ranges, right? So do you try to encourage, based on all these statistics and the reality of spending in retirement in these phases, do you try to encourage clients to spend towards the top end of their capacity sooner? And are you coaching them towards that?
Yeah, absolutely. I think, for the vast majority of clients that I work with, if we kind of plug their numbers into the software that allows us to look at success rates of plan based on either backward-looking data or forward-looking kind of Monte Carlo simulation stuff, the vast majority of people are 90% plus, right?
Right.
So in fact, a lot of them are 95% plus.
Mm-hmm.
And to me, a plan with 100% success rate is a plan that will 100% fail, right? So, you are 100% going to run out of money. So I try and reframe this. The way that I try and frame it is chance of underspending. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
So you've got 100% chance of underspending, not 100% success rate of a plan. You've got a 90% chance of underspending. Mm-hmm. When I start talking to them about this, they're like, oh, so I've only got a 10% chance that I'm ever going to overspend? Yeah. And by the way, if your line goes on one of those 10% lines, we'll just make a couple of little tweaks and you'll be absolutely fine. So this is about future adjustments. So
yeah, I think that's a great point, because when I first hear you, I think when people hear you say you have a 95% chance of success, what you're seeing is that's 100% chance of failure. You're saying that there's 100% chance you're going to leave a lot of life on the table and a lot of opportunity to live.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah.
We talk about memories and experiences, right? I'm sure we'll get into this memory thing in a bit as part of the white paper, but you're not, ultimately, people are not leaving money on the table. They're leaving memories and experiences on the table. That is what people are leaving. They're leaving time and energy and ability to spend stuff with loved ones and on things that they want to do. I absolutely encourage people. What I've really started to do a lot is, in a very lovely, coachy, nice way, tell people what they should spend. Right. So I call it the 80% plan. So really, there's two kind of guardrails I'll look at. So we'll create a plan and what it comes out with. So most people are 90% plus. If they tell us what they're going to spend versus their assets, and we put in some evidence around real-time spending declines and all of that stuff, the vast majority are sitting well over 90%. I'll then create a plan that says, with an 80% chance of underspending and a 20% chance of future adjustments, this is what you can spend. And by the way, unless we come up to some really amazing reason why, that's how much I'm going to deliver to you every month, because I want you to go and spend it.
So you're even proactively trying to kind of force out distributions and withdrawals and saying, hey, this is the money that we can send to you.
Yeah.
And try to prompt them that way. Interesting.
Because I'll make a number up and I'll put it in dollars. So if a client is saying that, if someone's saying that I want to spend $50,000 a year, and I say, well, you can spend $80,000 a year, and I say, well, what would you do with that extra $30,000? Just now start thinking. And and then I've had it before where they go, do you know what? I've put everything into the 50, right? I mean, that's the holidays I want to do and the things I want to do and all this stuff. And you go, well, what charities are close to your heart? Like, what do you, because the science around giving is huge, right? You know, we all know that giving our time and money away whilst we've got, you know, whilst we can see the impact of it is massive. A lot of them will bring forward some of the stuff they want to do for their children. So, you know, it's kind of like, well, you're saying I can spend another $30,000 a year. I've wanted to give, you know, $60,000 to help my eldest do something. I can probably bring forward 2 years worth of like the spend and give it to them, can't I? Yeah, absolutely. That's fine. You can do that. So this is just about, and it may not be that you chuck out the income every month. It might be that they know that they've got capacity of spending. Right. So within the year, they can take another $30,000 out as a lump sum to go and do something with.
Well, I love how you've made that conversation focused and intentional. And without that prompt, they're not going to take a distribution. They're not going to consider it. They're going to save and invest the money or keep it in there growing over time. And they're going to be that 80% that doesn't spend their money in retirement, right? Yes. So putting that in front of them and helping them through that, you know, thought process can help affect some change, right? Get them to change the way that they're going about it, which is great.
Yeah. And I think what I try and do with the guardrails is to take away some of this fear, because I think, you know, that one of the biggest fears that they have for people, particularly in a modern retirement without the type of defined benefits that used to exist, is that, you know, all of the weight of money is sitting on their shoulders now. They've got this pot of money, and this pot of money has to last. And I've got some thoughts around guaranteed income, etc. But ultimately,
I had a question about that, because that was an interesting point for me. And I don't know if this is what you were referring to, but were you getting at with this guaranteed income idea? Were you looking at things like guaranteed income streams from annuities and other financial vehicles that are out there that people could take advantage of?
Yeah.
Because again, I'm financial product agnostic. I think some people love them and some people hate them. I think the truth is always somewhere in between with anything that you look at. But from an annuity standpoint, I had never really seen the statistics about spending out of income versus spending out of savings and the psychological component to that. So that might be worth maybe digging into a little bit.
It's really interesting, right? So if I sit in front of a couple and I mention to them kind of in this 3-year window, we're planning for this work and the work that we're going to do, the focus work. And by the way, one of those challenges that you're going to face is your ability to spend money. You know, it's going to be a challenge. So we're going to work on that. A typical response from people is, oh, no, don't worry, Dan, I've got no problem. I can spend money. So we'll be fine. And I'm like, no. You can spend income that's being replaced the next month. You've never spent capital that you're intentionally taking down. You're intentionally depleting it.
Right.
And then I have a couple of questions around how would that feel? And you can see instantly the realization in their face. They're like, oh yeah, no, if I couldn't replace it, I'd struggle to really spend it. I think that's an interesting observation, number one. But Michael Finker and David Blanchett and Wade Pfau have done a lot of work and research around annuities and guaranteed income. And Michael Finker and David Blanchett produced this wonderful paper called A License to Spend. And really, their research concluded that 60% of people are much more comfortable spending from income than from savings. And actually, as a sample size, one that sounds quite high, but I don't think it's high enough personally from the conversations I've had with clients. And the basis was, they said to people, if you had an additional £10,000 of income for life, or £140,000 in your retirement savings. So on current annuity rates, $140,000 will give you $10,000 a year of income. And across all wealth levels, there's not much in it in terms of percentages. Around 60% of people said they'd find it easier to spend the $10,000 of income than actually take $1 out of the $140,000 lump sum that they had. And also what they then found is on average, people with foundational levels of guaranteed income spend about twice as much during their retirement lives than people that don't have any.
Mm-hmm.
What an unbelievable statistic. Because
Yeah.
what they find is that if you're pushing this income out to people, they will absolutely spend it. The fear of running out of money means they don't spend anywhere near enough. To me, all of that says that we need to kind of, in a lovely way, force income out to them because they will spend it. They will
Right.
spend it on stuff. So, yeah, I found that research fascinating.
Yeah. I was glad to come across it. Again, I've used annuities in the past. I'll probably use them in the future. But the way that you tied that research into the problem of spending, I thought was brilliant and really useful and worth considering. As I normally do, I think I got us down a tangent. We were talking about memories, and I want to make sure we spend a few minutes just talking about things like memory planning and memory dividends. What should we be shooting for here? If we're spending our money, what's this all for, I guess, as we kind of wrap up?
I drew a sketch. One of my really early sketches that I drew that's in the white paper was this concept that everybody kind of focuses on, this kind of how much can I withdraw each year without running out, and how can I maintain my lifestyle on a budget, and what I'm doing, I'm turning my investments into income. But I think we need to, again, the skill of spending is reframing and challenging that language. And to me, what you want to do in the second half of your life more than ever is turn your money into memories. Mm-hmm. Because, this is kind of saying that, rather than focusing on that kind of, investments into income stream, turning money into memories will give us like an investment return, so to speak. It's like a return that's far beyond dollars or pounds and pence. That kind of, spending your money with loved ones and sharing experiences and exploring new things and indulging in passions, they will stick with you far longer with you and your family than kind of what any balance in your bank account will kind of give you. And we talk about retirement memory planning. On top of that, there's this thing called memory dividends, which I first come across in Bill Perkins' brilliant book Die with Zero. And I know there's other people that have written about this probably before Bill, but and that is that concept that the experiences that your money will buy will pay emotional returns long after the money is spent. And you will recall these at dinners, at Christmas time, at Thanksgiving, at birthdays, and they're the cherished experiences that we will take with us. And the conversations I've had with people around, when you look at people end of life, and I had the brilliant Jordan Grummett on my podcast that talked. He was a hospice doctor and done end of life planning, and he, the thing that they didn't regret, not saving enough. They didn't regret. What they regretted was not creating enough experiences. They regretted not trying stuff. It wasn't whether they failed or they succeeded. They didn't care about the outcome. They regretted not actually trying or doing.
Right.
And so you rightly said, Jim, the point of your money is to what? I mean, the point of 20, 30 years of work, for a lot of people, that work isn't necessarily filled with joy. It's kind of a means to an end, to get to a point where you then feel uncomfortable and fearful of spending, which means you're not going to have the experiences or create the memories that you want, seems to me a really rubbish way to exist. And we know that there is a much better way to do this. And it doesn't mean you need millions of dollars or pounds in the bank. It just means you need some intentionality about what's meaningful to you, what you want to do, what memories you want to create, and then working with people like us to put some frameworks in place to make it happen for you.
Yeah. It's great. We're coming up on an hour, so I want to get you out of here. Is there anything else you want to leave people with? Thoughts from the white paper, or anything else that we haven't covered?
That fragile decade's important. Don't worry about not starting early. Start with intention and start with seriousness. Retirement has to be really on your mind to make this impactful. And understand that spending money is a skill that you absolutely need to have to be able to take full advantage of all of the stuff you've been through to get to the point where you are. And that work could and should form part of everybody's retirement plan, because work gives us, by the way, going back to those big five, work gives us purpose and identity and relationships, a concept of time and some money security. Just don't do stuff you don't want to do, and have a bit of freedom with it. I find, just to kind of, I put something out on LinkedIn the other day, and I had this kind of head thought, and I just got on video and recorded me talking in my car. And it was about just reframing this again a little bit more. So when we were growing up, we think about three phases, right? You think about kind of education, work, retirement. That's kind of, that's the old way of thinking about things. We know that model's broken. So when I think about our childhood and our education, I would say that is a period where we have freedom, but without wisdom, right? So we have time freedom, but we don't know a lot. Actually, my 16-year-old daughter seems to think she knows everything, but that's a whole story. But we don't know a lot and all that stuff. We then get into a point where I think we are constrained, but learning, right? So our freedom gets taken away from us a little bit, but we're learning and we're creating skills and we're knowledge and wisdom. My God, we get to a point where we are free with wisdom. That is the period we need to take advantage of. So we get to a point where we can go, right, actually, I can take back my freedom. I've accumulated a lifetime of knowledge and wisdom. I now need to take advantage of this and do things. So a bit like the Ikigai exercise, why not use that wisdom to give back? Why not use that wisdom to work on your terms? Have freedom, do things you love doing. Don't make it about the money, and it will, and honestly, you and I have seen people do this well, and they are some of the happiest, most joyful people that I come across. And I want to spread more of that out into the world.
Yeah, I love it. You're doing a lot of great work, Dan. Again, I really appreciate your time. One last quick question. We referenced a lot of research and a couple of books that have kind of come up in our conversation. Are there any other recommendations, books people should check out, maybe podcasts that you like that are kind of centered around retirement at all?
I'm a big reader, and behind me there's a number of books. I'm going to turn around because I need to. So get your pen and papers ready, everybody. This is what we need to do. I think Happy Money by Elizabeth Dunn is an amazing book that talks about spending money. There's a really lovely book by a lady called Patrice Jenkins. It's a little book, and it's called What Will I Do All Day? And it is phenomenal. And so I love that. And then Christine Benz's new book, How to Retire, 20 Lessons. She's interviewed 20 experts across. So I would start with those three books. I think give a real good foundation about kind of Christine's book is kind of an overview of retirement. Patrice's book is about kind of time. What am I going to do with my days? And then Elizabeth Dunn's book is about how you're going to actually utilize your money and spend it.
Awesome. So we'll link to all that came up in those recommendations in the show notes and on the website post here. And did I see, is Christine going to be on your podcast upcoming?
She's been on. She has. Yeah, she's been on a couple of times. So I had her on really early on, and then I thought I've got to get her back and talk about her book.
Cool.
So yeah, she's been on, and one of my favorite chapters in her book is the end one with Jordan Grummett about purpose. And I reached out to Jordan; he recently come on as well. So.
Awesome, cool. So people who want to check out your podcast is obviously at humansversusretirement.com.
Yeah, humansversusretirement.com is the website, and it's available on Apple and Spotify and all the other things. And increasingly people are watching it on YouTube, which I love. So
yeah, that's great. Good. Yeah, and a lot of good stuff, the blogs, the sketch, the newsletter, which I encourage people to sign up for. Dan, you're putting out a lot of great work. And again, appreciate your time and your expertise. It's always good to chat about these things with you. So thanks for coming on.
Appreciate you having me on, Jim. Thanks.
All right. Thanks, everybody, for listening, and we'll see you guys next time. Take care. A quick note, although I do hope that you find the information on this show to be helpful, in no way are any of these discussions to be taken as specific financial advice. Please do your own research and talk to your own advisors, especially when making important financial decisions.